Sophia, a 25-year-old woman with striking beauty, had never imagined herself in the world of the wealthy elite. As a maid at the exclusive Aldridge mansion, a sprawling estate tucked in the heart of Manhattan, she worked tirelessly, maintaining the perfect atmosphere of luxury that the family demanded. Her days were long, filled with dusting priceless antiques, cleaning floors that could rival any marble palace, and making sure the kitchen ran like a five-star restaurant. Though Sophia had always kept to herself, she'd heard rumors about the Aldridge family. They were powerful, untouchable, especially the son, Damien Aldridge. At 30 years old, Damien was one of the most eligible billionaires in New York. He had inherited his family's vast fortune after the untimely death of his father, and since then, he'd taken charge of the empire with a ruthless ambition that had earned him both admiration and fear. His life seemed perfect, glamorous, full of lavish parties, exotic vacations, and an endless stream of women vying for his attention. Sophia had never been interested in Damien, but she knew all too well the power he held. She could only dream of a life outside the mansion, one where she didn't scrub dishes and pick up after the very people who looked down on her. But it was her job, and she had to make ends meet. That was until one fateful afternoon. The Aldridge mansion was hosting one of its famous private parties. The family had planned a lavish charity gala, and as expected, it was to be the talk of the town. The air was thick with excitement as guests arrived in their most elegant evening wear. Limo drivers shuffled back and forth, bringing the cream of society to the mansion's entrance, while the estate staff worked overtime to prepare the event. Sophia, busy in the kitchen, didn't think much of it. She had seen her fair share of celebrity guests and dignitaries, but she preferred to stay out of their way. That was until she overheard a conversation between the family matriarch, Clarissa Aldridge, and one of the other maids, Janet. "I don't know why Damien insisted on inviting that girl, but if she shows up to the party, it's going to be a disaster." Clarissa's voice was cold, dripping with disdain. "Sophia doesn't belong in our world." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Her chest tightened with the realization that they were talking about her. She had never imagined that Damien, who rarely took notice of the staff, would actually want her at a party. But what was it that made her so different? As she walked past the kitchen doorway, Janet caught her eye. "Clarissa is planning something," Janet whispered with a knowing look. "She doesn't think you belong at the party. She's hoping you'll make a fool of yourself. Just wait and see." Sophia was taken aback. She had always kept her head down, never wanting to attract attention. But now, it seemed like someone had decided to make her the subject of their cruel joke. Despite the anxiety swirling in her stomach, Sophia had a feeling that this night would change everything. The day of the party arrived, and Sophia was given a beautiful silk dress to wear, one that she could only dream of affording. The dress was a deep sapphire blue, the color of the ocean at twilight, with a lace bodice that hugged her curves perfectly. It was stunning, but still, Sophia felt out of place. She was a maid, and this dress, no matter how elegant, could never change that. But Clarissa insisted with an air of mockery. "You'll wear it and attend the party, or I'll have you sent home," she sneered, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "Let's see how you do among the rich and famous. Maybe you'll finally understand why you don't belong here." Sophia's palms were sweaty, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the dress in the mirror. She had no choice. She couldn't lose her job, but she wasn't prepared for what was about to unfold. The grand ballroom of the Aldridge mansion was lit with thousands of twinkling lights, chandeliers glittering above like fallen stars. Guests in tuxedos and evening gowns moved gracefully through the space, their laughter echoing off the walls. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the faint scent of roses from the flower arrangements that lined the walls. Sophia stepped into the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She could already feel the eyes on her, the judgment, the whispers. She kept her head down, walking past the guests who gave her curious, sometimes condescending glances. But then she felt it. A pair of eyes locked onto hers. It was Damien. He stood near the grand staircase, dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his dark hair styled just right, looking every bit the billionaire heir he was. His eyes narrowed, intrigued by her sudden appearance. Clarissa noticed too. her face instantly contorting in irritation. "What is she doing here?" Clarissa hissed under her breath to a nearby guest. Damien, however, was unfazed. His expression was unreadable as he made his way toward Sophia. The guests around them seemed to part like the Red Sea, some staring in disbelief, others waiting for the inevitable spectacle that was sure to come. Sophia's heart hammered in her chest. Was this part of the joke? She had no idea what Damien's intentions were, but she couldn't back out now, not in front of all these people. "Miss Sophia, I'm glad you could join us," Damien said, his voice smooth and calm, yet laced with a hint of amusement. Sophia looked up, surprised. She had never heard him speak to her directly before. In fact, she had barely exchanged 2 words with him in the years she had worked at the mansion. He was always so distant, so consumed with his own world, that she had almost convinced herself he wouldn't even notice her. "I hope you don't mind, but I've arranged a small surprise for you," he added, his eyes sparkling with a mischievous glint. Sophia didn't know what to say. Her mind was racing, trying to figure out if this was part of some cruel game or if Damien truly meant it. But before she could respond, a hush fell over the room. Clarissa stepped forward, her voice dripping with venom. "Damien, what is the meaning of this?" she demanded. "Why did you invite this girl to our event? She's a maid, not one of us." Damien glanced at his mother with a steely look. His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "Mother, I invited Sophia because she deserves to be here just like anyone else. This party is for everyone, and I believe it's time we stop judging people based on their station in life." The room fell silent. It wasn't often that Damien spoke out against his family, especially in front of their elite guests. But this time, he stood his ground. Sophia felt a strange surge of relief, mixed with confusion. Was he really defending her, or was this part of his plan to get under his mother's skin? At that moment, Damien's eyes locked with hers again, his gaze unwavering. There was something in the way he looked at her, a curiosity, an intrigue that she couldn't quite place. But then something unexpected happened. The maids, the waitstaff, and even some of the guests began to whisper. The dress that Sophia wore was not just a beautiful silk creation, it was a work of art. A custom-made gown worth over 2 million euros. The word spread like wildfire. "What kind of maid wears a 2 million euros dress?" someone muttered. Sophia's face flushed with embarrassment. She felt the weight of their judgment bearing down on her, but she stood her ground, refusing to let it show. She had worked so hard for this moment, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it from her. But there was more to come, and the night was far from over. The whispers about Sophia's 2 million euros dress intensified as the night unfolded. Guests who had once ignored her now turned their attention toward her, their eyes filled with a mix of awe and judgment. Even Damien seemed to take a step back, as if unsure whether to continue his defense of her. His gaze remained locked on her, though an undeniable spark of intrigue still lighting his expression. Sophia tried to steady her breathing. She had never wanted this kind of attention, let alone the kind that came with wearing a dress that was worth more than her entire yearly salary. But she couldn't back out now. She'd come this far, and as much as she wanted to slip away quietly, she couldn't shake the feeling that Damien's attention was like a magnet, pulling her deeper into his world. As the night wore on, the gala proceeded with the usual luxury, exquisite wine, delicate hors d'oeuvres, and the smooth sounds of a string quartet playing in the background. Yet Sophia felt as if she were in a world entirely separate from everyone else. She moved through the crowd, trying to stay out of the way, but it was impossible. Wherever she went, eyes followed. Her steps were calculated, careful, but no matter how hard she tried to blend into the background, she couldn't. Damien's gaze was like a spotlight that never wavered, and the closer she got to him, the more intense the air around them became. The tension between them was palpable, and she could feel it in her very bones. He was drawn to her, but why? Was it because she was the one person in the room who didn't fit in, who wasn't dazzled by his wealth and status? Or was there something more to this attraction, something that went beyond the boundaries of class and social expectation? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Damien walked toward her. This time there was no teasing smile, no hints of amusement, only a quiet, intense focus. He was no longer the carefree, confident billionaire she had heard so much about. Tonight, he was something else entirely. He was a man intrigued by the mystery that was Sophia. "Can I have a word with you?" he asked, his voice low but purposeful. Sophia nodded, her throat suddenly dry. The weight of the room felt like it was pressing down on her shoulders, but she didn't dare refuse. She followed him as he led her to a quiet corner of the mansion's expansive garden, where the sounds of the party faded into the background, replaced by the rustle of the night breeze and the soft hum of distant conversation. They stood in the shadows of a large marble column, the soft glow of lanterns casting faint shadows across the garden. Damien's eyes studied her, not with the arrogance she expected, but with something else, something deeper. His gaze roamed over her, lingering on her dress for just a moment too long. "You look incredible," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia could feel her cheeks redden, but she forced herself to maintain her composure. "I don't belong here, Damien," she said softly, her voice betraying the vulnerability she was trying so hard to hide. "I know that, and everyone else knows it too. I'm just a maid. This dress, this life, it's not meant for me." Damien tilted his head slightly, considering her words carefully. His expression softened, and for a brief moment, he seemed to forget about the opulence surrounding them. There was no power play in his gaze, no hint of superiority, just a man who was trying to understand her. "You're right," he said finally, his voice steady. "This life, it's not for you, but I don't think you're just a maid, Sophia. You're something more, and I'm starting to believe that the world you think you don't belong in might be the world you're meant to be a part of." Sophia stared at him, unsure how to respond. Her heart was racing, and she felt an odd pull toward him, something she had never felt for anyone else. Despite his wealth and status, there was a vulnerability to Damien that she couldn't ignore. And though he was worlds apart from her, in that moment they were connected. Before she could speak, there was a sudden interruption, a familiar voice cutting through the stillness of the night. "Damien, there you are." Clarissa, Damien's mother, appeared at the entrance to the garden, her expression cool and controlled as always. She was impeccably dressed, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled. She looked every bit the picture of high society, and her eyes were locked on Sophia with unmistakable disdain. "You've been gone for quite some time," she added, her gaze briefly flicking to Sophia before returning to her son. "I believe we're waiting for your speech." Damien's face hardened at the sight of his mother, but he didn't immediately reply. Instead, he looked back at Sophia, his eyes softening once more. "I'll be right there," he said, his voice firm. But there was an underlying tension in his words that made Sophia uneasy. It was clear that his mother wasn't pleased with the interaction, and she was more than capable of making his life difficult if she so wished. Sophia took a step back, suddenly aware of how out of place she was in the garden, in the world that Damien inhabited. The last thing she wanted was to cause trouble for him. "I should go," she muttered, her voice barely audible. Damien's gaze followed her as she turned to leave, a flash of frustration crossing his face. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but then stopped, glancing over at his mother, who was already waiting expectantly. "All right," he said, his tone flat. "I'll catch up with you later." Sophia didn't look back. She didn't dare. Her heart ached, but she kept walking, back toward the mansion where the other staff members were no doubt gossiping about her. She could already imagine the whispers, the judgment. She was a maid, and no matter how stunning her dress was, no matter how hard she tried, she would always remain the help. Back inside, Clarissa made sure to keep Sophia at a distance. The rest of the night passed in a blurred chatter and laughter, clinking glasses, and the endless parade of luxury that surrounded her. She tried to disappear into the background, doing her best to avoid the gazes of the partygoers and the condescending remarks of the Aldridge family. But Damien's words echoed in her mind. "You're something more." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that her life could be different, that she could rise above her station, but it felt impossible. The world she was part of, this world of wealth, of privilege, was a world that was never meant for people like her. As the evening wore on and the party began to wind down, Sophia's feet ached from standing so long in heels. She could barely remember how many hours had passed, but she was ready to leave. She was tired of feeling like an outsider, like an anomaly in a world where she didn't belong. But then, just as she was about to slip away, she felt a hand on her shoulder. "Sophia," Damien's voice cut through the noise of the departing guests, his voice calm yet urgent. "Wait." Sophia turned slowly, her heart racing. She wasn't sure what to expect, but whatever it wasn't what she had imagined. "Damien," she began, but before she could finish, he stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "I've been thinking about you all night," he admitted, his voice low, filled with a raw honesty that sent a shiver down her spine. "And I can't stop thinking about the fact that you deserve more than this life, this job, this dress." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Was this a dream? Or was Damien truly standing there, admitting that he wanted something more from her? "I don't know what's going on between us," he continued, "but I'm not going to pretend it's just the dress or the party. There's something else, and I think you feel it too." Sophia's mind was spinning, her heart fluttering in her chest. She had never imagined that this night would end this way. Sophia stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. Damien's words echoed in her ears, his proximity sending waves of warmth through her body. The surreal nature of the moment made it hard for her to process everything. She had never expected something like this, especially not from someone like him. "You think there's something between us?" she asked, her voice shaky. She didn't know whether to feel elated or terrified. She had been a maid her entire life, relegated to the shadows, and now Damien Aldridge, a billionaire, was standing before her, confessing that he felt something for her. The idea was as thrilling as it was terrifying. Damien took a step closer, closing the space between them. His intense gaze didn't waver. "Yes, I do, and I'm not the kind of man to shy away from what I want." He paused, his eyes softening as though searching for the right words. "I want you, Sophia, not because of your dress, not because of your station, but because of who you are. There's something about you, your strength, your heart, that's different from everyone else in my world, and I can't ignore it." Sophia's breath hitched. She didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to believe him, to give in to the attraction she had felt toward him ever since that first moment he'd spoken to her at the party. But another part of her was consumed by doubt. She didn't belong in his world. She wasn't like the women he usually dated, the women who came from families as rich and powerful as his own. "I'm just a maid, Damien," she said softly, her voice filled with vulnerability. "I'm not part of your world. You could have anyone you want. Why would you want someone like me?" Damien's expression hardened for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low but firm. "Because, Sophia, you're the only person I've met who doesn't want anything from me. You don't see me as some billionaire who can give you everything you've ever wanted. You see me as Damien, and that's something I've been searching for a long time, but I don't expect you to understand that." Sophia swallowed hard, the lump in her throat threatening to choke her. She had never thought of herself as someone who could be worthy of Damien. Her life had always been one of service, one of being overlooked and dismissed. She had been invisible to people like him, and now, suddenly, she was. But that realization only made her more afraid. "I can't do this, Damien," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't be part of your world. I don't belong here." Damien stepped forward again, this time his hand reaching out to gently grasp her arm. His touch was warm, grounding, and Sophia couldn't help but lean into it. Her breath came faster, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. "You do belong here, Sophia," he said quietly, his thumb brushing over her skin. "You belong in my world with me." For a long moment, they simply stood there, locked in a silent standoff. Sophia's mind screamed for her to pull away, to leave and go back to the life she knew. But her heart, her wild, unpredictable heart, whispered something different. It told her that maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself to be a part of Damien's world, even if it scared her. But then, just as quickly as the moment had arrived, it was gone. A voice interrupted their closeness, Clarissa. "There you are, Damien," she called, her tone dripping with condescension. She had been watching from the doorway, her sharp eyes observing every move. "It's time to speak to the press. You wouldn't want to keep your guests waiting." Damien's face darkened at the interruption, but he didn't immediately respond. His gaze lingered on Sophia for a moment longer, the intensity of his feelings still hanging in the air between them. "I'll be there in a moment, Mother," he said, his voice cool and collected once again. Clarissa didn't seem satisfied, but she turned and left without another word, leaving them alone again in the silence of the garden. But the moment had shifted. The magic between them was broken, replaced by the looming presence of Clarissa and the weight of the Aldridge family legacy. Sophia took a step back, pulling herself out of his grasp. "I should go," she said quickly, her voice shaking. "You have your responsibilities. I don't belong here. I need to go back to my work." Damien reached out for her again, his hand hovering in the air, but he didn't touch her this time. He didn't want to push her away, but he could see that she was pulling back. He understood why, but it didn't make it any easier. "Sophia," he started, but she had already turned away, walking back toward the mansion with quick, purposeful steps. Damien stayed where he was, staring after her, his heart heavy with regret. He knew what he wanted, but he didn't know if he could convince her to believe in it too. The days that followed were tense and confusing. Sophia threw herself into her work, trying to forget the confusing and emotional whirlwind of the night. She had done her best to distance herself from the events at the gala, telling herself it was just a fleeting moment, a brief lapse in reality. But she couldn't forget Damien's words, the way he had looked at her, the way he had made her feel like she could be someone more than just the maid. She had returned to her usual routine, cleaning, preparing meals, and making sure the mansion was spotless. But there was an unease in her chest that wouldn't go away. She couldn't shake the image of Damien standing in front of her, his hand reaching out as if he wanted to pull her into his world. And worse, she couldn't shake the thought that maybe she wanted to be pulled in. But she couldn't allow herself to want it. She couldn't let herself get caught up in a fantasy that would only end in heartbreak. Damien was a billionaire. He had everything he could possibly want. And she was just a maid, a woman who would always be on the outside looking in. It was 2 days after the gala when Sophia was called to the mansion study. She wasn't sure what to expect. Damien hadn't spoken to her since that night, and she had avoided him as much as possible, keeping her head down and focusing on her work. But now, here she was, standing in front of his office door, unsure of what awaited her. When she stepped inside, Damien was sitting behind his desk, looking as commanding and composed as always. But his eyes softened when he saw her, and for a moment, Sophia could have sworn she saw something vulnerable in them. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice calm but with a hint of urgency. "I need to talk to you." Sophia nodded, her heart racing. She didn't know what to expect, but she couldn't stop the surge of hope that was building inside her. Was he finally going to tell her what he truly wanted, or was he going to tell her to leave? Damien stood up and walked toward her, his steps slow but deliberate. "Sophia, I know this isn't easy for you. I know you're scared, but I need you to understand something." He reached out, his hand gently brushing her arm. "I'm not asking you to change your life. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we belong in each other's lives." Sophia looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to say something, wanted to ask him what he meant, but the words wouldn't come. She was afraid of getting too close, afraid of getting hurt. But in that moment, she realized something. She was already in too deep, and maybe that was okay. "I don't know what this is, Damien," she whispered, her voice trembling, "but I can't ignore it anymore." Damien smiled, the warmth in his expression unmistakable. "You don't have to know everything right now. All I want is a chance to show you what we could be." Sophia swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle deep within her. This was it, the moment that would change everything. She didn't know where this would lead, but for the first time in a long time, she was willing to find out. And with that, she stepped closer to him, allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could belong in his world. Sophia hadn't expected her heart to race the way it did when she stepped into Damien's study. She had spent the past few days replaying their conversation in the garden, wondering if she had misread his intentions. Every time she closed her eyes, his words echoed in her mind. You belong in my world with me. But even as she stood before him, the uncertainty remained. What did it mean for her to be with someone like him? She wasn't part of his glamorous world of luxury and power. She was a maid, a servant to the Aldridge family. Yet, Damien seemed so sure of what he wanted. The question was whether she could allow herself to believe in it too. Damien was standing by his desk now, his hands folded in front of him. His usual composed demeanor was slightly softened, as if he was giving himself permission to show vulnerability, something he rarely allowed others to see. I know this isn't easy for you, Sophia, he said, his voice steady but laced with a quiet intensity. But you're different from anyone I've ever met, and I need you to understand that. Sophia took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She had never been good at opening up to people, and now, here she was, standing in front of a billionaire who was willing to turn his world upside down for her. It was almost too surreal to grasp. I don't understand, she admitted, her voice trembling. Damien, this isn't just about us, it's about everything. The difference between our worlds, the expectations, the judgments. Damien's eyes softened as he stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. I know, I'm asking a lot of you, and I don't expect you to drop everything and walk into my world without hesitation. But I can't keep pretending that what we have isn't real. I don't care about the money, the status, the power. All I care about is you. Sophia felt her heart skip a beat. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let herself fall into whatever this was between them. But it was hard. Every part of her was telling her to hold back, to protect herself from the inevitable disappointment that awaited her when their worlds collided. She swallowed hard and finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. And what happens when your world gets in the way, when I'm not enough? Damien's hand reached out to gently touch her arm, his fingers warm against her skin. I don't want to lose you, Sophia. I don't care if it's difficult. I want to make this work. There was a silence between them, a heavy pause that lingered in the air like a weight neither of them could shake off. But in that moment, the walls she had built around herself started to crumble. She had spent her entire life avoiding anything that could potentially hurt her. But Damien was offering her something she had never even dared to dream about. A chance to be seen, to be valued, not for her status, but for who she was. Later that evening, Sophia found herself in a quiet corner of the mansion, trying to process everything that had happened. Her heart was still racing, but it wasn't from fear anymore, it was from something else. Hope. It was strange, almost foreign to her, but it felt real. She hadn't heard from Damien after their conversation, but she could feel the tension in the air every time she passed by him. It was like there was a silent understanding between them now, an unspoken promise that they were on the same path, even if that path wasn't entirely clear. It wasn't until the next morning, just as the sun was beginning to rise, that she got the call. Miss Sophia, Mr. Aldridge is requesting your presence, the butler said over the phone. Sophia's pulse quickened. She was already preparing to get to work for the day, but the idea of seeing Damien again filled her with anticipation and nerves. She had no idea what he wanted, but she couldn't deny that she was curious. The events of the previous night had left her with a million questions, questions she was too afraid to ask. When she arrived in the grand dining room, the table was set for two, and Damien was sitting at one end, his usual composure now replaced with a more relaxed air. He looked at her as she walked in, his eyes scanning her with that same intensity. Good morning, he said, standing up to greet her. I'm glad you came. Sophia nodded, her heart still racing. Of course, what's this about? Damien gestured for her to sit down. I wanted to talk about us. Sophia sat, her stomach fluttering. This was the conversation she had been dreading, but it also felt like the moment she had been waiting for. The moment where she would finally understand what Damien truly wanted from her. I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other night, Damien continued, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. About the difference between our worlds. Sophia nodded, her gaze steady. And he smiled slightly, though there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. I don't have an easy answer, but I do know this, I don't want to lose you because of the differences between us. I'm willing to fight for this for you, but I need to know you're willing to fight too." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment of truth. She could choose to walk away, to remain in the life she knew, safe and predictable. Or she could take a leap into the unknown, into a life that was uncertain but filled with potential. Damien was waiting for her response, his eyes never leaving hers. She could see the vulnerability in him, the way he was allowing himself to be open in a way he hadn't before. "Damien," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I've spent so much of my life hiding from anything that could hurt me. I've always kept my distance, thinking I wasn't good enough for something like this." Damien reached across the table, taking her hand gently in his. His touch sent a shiver through her, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel something more than fear. "But maybe," she continued, her voice softening, "maybe I'm ready to try, to see what happens when we stop holding back." Damien's smile widened, and for the first time, Sophia saw the man she had only glimpsed in the garden, a man who wasn't just a billionaire, but someone who was willing to open his heart to her. "I'm glad to hear that," he said softly, "because I think we can make something incredible happen together, if you'll give me a chance." Sophia looked down at their joined hands, her heart swelling with emotion. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the unknown. She was ready to step into it, with Damien by her side. In the weeks that followed, things between Sophia and Damien evolved in ways neither of them had expected. Their relationship was tested by the expectations of the Aldridge family, the media, and the vast differences in their social circles. But through it all, they remained committed to each other. Damien continued to defy his family's expectations, slowly but surely making it clear that he wouldn't be swayed by their pressures. Sophia, for her part, embraced the challenges, growing more confident in her role in Damien's life and in her own self-worth. Their love, once forbidden and improbable, had blossomed into something strong and unshakable. It was a love that transcended wealth and status, a love that was built on trust, vulnerability, and the understanding that sometimes the most unexpected connections were the ones that could change everything. And so, despite the world around them trying to pull them apart, Sophia and Damien built a future together, one that was theirs and theirs alone. If you enjoyed this billionaire romance, please like and subscribe to the Billionaire Evolution channel for more luxury love stories. See you tomorrow.